Okay, let's get started. Thanks for joining us. I'm Skip Sponcell. I'm the host of Innovation Showcases, and we're going to be joined today by the team from MEP and the team from Emerging Tech Accelerator. The idea is to share with you what we do and how it's helpful to manufacturers, and then we want to get into a discussion with you about how it might be helpful to MEP centers individually and MEP centers as a network. So to get started, I want to introduce or bring in, you know him already, bring in Chris Shear. So you've invited this crowd to attend, and you had some very specific thoughts in mind. What were you thinking in putting this program together?
Sure. Well, first, good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining us. We're hoping to interest you in joining us at OMAP in further developing this Innovation Showcase product into an MEP system offering. This offering, as I think you already know, fits the technology acceleration space, which, of course, is of great interest to the MEP program office and, as we heard recently, the National Advisory Board. Two most recent quarterly meetings were dominated by discussions regarding technology acceleration, and those of you that engaged in the recompetition are highly aware that there is going to be a requirement for all of us to stand up a bundle of program offerings that address this notion of technology acceleration. On the other hand, so far as I can see, the actual system offerings in this area are pretty thin on the ground. There are some good things happening, but many of them aren't widely adopted or even sometimes adoptable. So we're hoping that this can fill a niche in that area. As I said in my email, we've used a portion of our MTAC funds to run a few Innovation Showcase events in the food processing space. And I've been really quite pleased with the quality of the program and the response to the marketplace. I think this thing has great potential. Because it's a web-based product, it's easily scalable and makes itself an ideal candidate for adoption across the MEP system. The product is an offering that has been developed by a company called Emerging Tech Accelerator. You'll be hearing more from Skip and our respective staff members about the product, what the product offers, and how it all works. So I'll leave that to them. I will say that I've been engaged with Skip for really several years now as they've adapted and readapted their system to better meet OMAP's market and service delivery system, which I think reflects the market and service delivery system in many, if not most of the centers. As we've learned from the MTAC experiments, the current iteration of the program has gained a lot of traction with small and medium-sized manufacturers and could serve as a great development program that we can work on together. So let's get to it. Skip, and move on to the next thing.
Okay, thanks, Chris. And now we want to bring in Linda Wexler and David McFeeters from Chris's team. And Chris, can you introduce these folks for us?
Sure. Linda joined us a little more than a year ago to stand up and manage our MTAC. She is a food processing industry consultant, has a degree in computer science and a master's in food science, as well as being trained as a chef. So she knows her food and she knows her technology, and has done a great job with the program and has worked very closely with ET Accelerator to move these showcases forward. David is an OMAP affiliate, and his role with us is to help us evaluate the potential for technology acceleration in Oregon and start connecting us with the others that are doing this work. He himself has a great deal of knowledge and expertise in the federally funded lab system, as well as has a lot of experience in technology development, deployment, diffusion, transfer, etc.
Great, thanks, Chris. And David, let's start with you. When folks registered for this event, we asked them, so what's the most difficult thing about tech acceleration? And we got 15 different varieties of hard and difficult. So in your experience, what are the key impediments that you have to overcome with any manufacturer?
Well, as you referenced, there really are a large number of different problems that come up. I think the major one, however, is really just finding the time to get the project started. If you can squeeze in some valuable time with the right people, you'll end up with a pretty solid, is making sure that the people involved who have the time have the right tools to be able to move the ball forward. Some of these are specialized tools, some of these are expensive. Some of them are just not as available to the general populace. So having some good resources really can help move the ball forward, again, speaking to time. Thirdly, there's just a general issue of the stuff that you find, making sure the topics are really on topic. A lot of irrelevant information is presented to you. If you're at a trade show, you just don't know what you're going to get. So being able to focus and get only the information you're most concerned about is really helpful. And then lastly, being able to coordinate amongst your own team has always been a problem. You may find a good person who is interested in your product moving forward, but they're just not quite able to move the ball forward. They're a good psychological champion, but they can't have the tools to be able to move it through their organization. And if you can put these things together, I think you've got a really good shot at making good acceleration, development acceleration, technology acceleration happen.
Great. Okay, so let's go over to Linda. And Linda, in your capacity as a program manager, you invent events, you manage events. When you are designing an event and you're thinking forward to, okay, at some point this is going to be over, people are going to push back from the table, they're going to get in their car and drive home, what do you want them to be thinking about, OMEP? What are your objectives in event design?
Well, first of all, first off, I want there to be really, really good attendance at the event. That's just for me as a program manager to know that the event is successful. What I want folks to walk away with is feeling that really impressed by the show. I want them to feel like it's a really good use of their time because their time is very valuable and precious. I also want them to feel really positive about the program and about the MEP, OMEP, for the last few showcases that we've had. And I also want them to feel like they've learned something new, that they walk away with some new knowledge that they didn't know before. And lastly, I'd really like for them to be clear on what their next steps are, after the showcase. How do they bring this information back to their team?
Well, great. Okay, so those are the objectives from a program management point of view and the impediments to be overcome from the tech scout's point of view and really from any consultant's point of view. So rather than spend a lot of time talking about how we do this, I thought we'd just show you a compression. This is 90 seconds compression of a 2-hour showcase. So Andy, can you roll that video right now and let's just have a look? We start with a pre-show countdown video to make the attendees feel welcome. In this case, we include 100 years of imagining robots as a way to emphasize how amazing the upcoming technology really is. Then, we kick off with a quick introduction of the top 3 innovative suppliers. We want each attendee to know that they're not alone, so we put up a virtual version of name badges. And then we introduce our panel, and they lay out the present and future situation and trends. Then we bring in the first innovative vendor, and the panel opens with questions that they and the audience want answered. And then off he goes. And it's not just slides. In this case, he's doing a live demo to train the robot to do a complete task. When he's done, the panel returns to interrogate and clarify. And then we bring in the next speaker. And he has some cool video that shows how his robot forklift processes its camera images. And now the panel is back, interrogate, clarify, and now the final innovative supplier. Again, lots of video. Here's a demonstration that shows how continuous improvement will be with software and not hardware swap outs. And then we're back to panel and a full group discussion to end the show. So, Linda, can we just pick up where you left off and give us some idea on how this method meets your objectives as the program manager?
Well, so far my experience has been using the showcases for the AMPAC grant activities. We've hosted 2 showcases, one in November and then one in February, and we have a 3rd showcase coming up at the end of July. And firstly, we've had really, really good attendance. At our last showcase in February, we had almost 250 registrants. And then we had over, I think, 150 participants actually attending the showcase. And that represented about 80 different companies. So I was really, really pleased with the attendance. That was way more than what I had originally thought would attend. I thought maybe only about 30 companies would attend. And some of the feedback I've gotten from after the showcases has been that the attendees really, really like the lively format. They like the video instead of the PowerPoint slides. They like that it's focused and but not too technical. They also have told me that they feel like they got enough information over the course of 2 hours to help them go back to their teams and kind of take the next step.
Great. So David, from your point of view as a tech scout and consultant.
So what I see here is just a really hyper-efficient system. You're really managing the potential client's time exceptionally well, and it's handling those first 3 impediments really, really terrifically. In the course of 2 hours, you've been able to present them with an outstanding solution that's going to be on topic because they've self-selected for this particular endeavor. And, you've done all the hard work for them. It's already done in advance. After the fact, the tools are in place to be able to help them move forward. But really getting through those first 3 steps are really the most important.
How important, we didn't talk about this earlier, but how important is it to have an environment where both consultant and client can attend together easily and then continue the discussion afterwards?
Well, I think that having everyone be on board is really terrific. I know that often I'll be helping clients and maybe there's a meeting that occurs and you haven't heard all the details. So the fact that it's recorded and you go back to listen to it, even if you can't do it live, gives everybody the opportunity to start at the same place and have the same information and be able to move that forward, I think, very efficiently.
Right. Now, so the show that the video we just showed was a robotics video, right? And we have other topics in development, and I'm just going to run you through some of them. This list of problem categories is driven by the fact that in the last couple of years we've been working mostly with food processors, growers and packers, forest products manufacturers, and paper and pulp. We're excited to work with more MEPs and have more sectors thrown at us. But just to give you some sense of how many problems we look at to get down to our programs, we got 50, you can't read this, but if I expand those categories, we have 50 topics that we're currently pursuing. If I drill down into the waste stream one, again, 5 topics in waste stream. We mentioned one of them already, removing suspended solids from water we did in February. And then coming up, Linda already mentioned this, July 29th, we've got the next one on filtering and reuse of water. Could be interesting, not just to food processors, but anybody who uses water in California or Texas, and who knows, maybe Oregon and Washington as well. So fun stuff coming up.
Yes, can you talk a little bit about what it costs to attend the showcase and also what types of folks attend?
Yep. Well, so it costs nothing to attend. We don't want to charge the attendee, and the reason for that is we don't want to discourage attendance. We want to do the opposite. We want to encourage teams to attend. So here's from our April event. This is the cross-section of attendees, and you can see that role players from across the organization or functional areas are attending. If you take a hierarchical view, if you think about the head count in a typical organization and the proportion of managers to worker bees, the attendees at an innovation showcase absolutely mirror the organization. So we're getting functional areas and management attending as committees. Now, you might say, well, gee, if you let people in, if you let anybody in and you don't charge, you got no quality control. So aren't you getting a lot of tire kickers? So this chart's pretty much, this is a static chart. It looks like this almost every event, that 75% of the attendees have the problem. They know they have the problem. They got to solve it. And some of them got to solve it right now. Only 25% or fewer tire kickers.
Can we talk about how do you get an audience for a tech showcase? Like, how do you reach out? Who do you reach out to?
Yeah, so let's do that. But before we talk about just how to put butts in seats, I want to spend a minute on what we're trying to do with the audience. I think I've mentioned this before, but just to make the point, it's not just getting attendance at an audience, it's building a relationship with the individual and the company behind the individual, getting them to come to the next one. So we have to delight them every time, so they'll come back and keep coming back, and invite their colleagues and invite other folks. So that's the objective, that's what we're trying to do. This graphic is just to make the point that it's not just the event, that's the mountaintop. There's a long run-up to create a successful event, and then there's a comet trail afterwards. So what do we do? What would you do? What we do is we get an audience, we got mailing lists, we got social media, and we already are working with pilot teams to do the mega problem development. But teaming with a network of MEPs would be very, very powerful, because you know the folks. You walk the plant floor. You know who's got a problem, and when you see the calendar, you can say, hey, Fred or Mary should come, and you can personally invite them and, attend along with them. For the Comet Trail, for the 36 months after an event, we do want to stay in touch with folks. We'll talk about that more later. We have newsletters and continuing contact points. We'll talk about that. But again, a network of MEPs means that if there's a reason somebody's waiting to deploy a solution, you'll know that with your eyeballs and with the personal relationship, and you already have a suite of innovation programs into which this flow of new interest can be directed. So that's what we're trying to do with the audience. So any questions about that, David or Linda?
Skip, yeah, I have a question. So this is for the overall program, how you get your audience interested in the showcases. But how about for each MEP center? What would they have to do to reach out to folks in their state?
Okay, so let's bring in the promotional pros for that. So Jasmine, you are the events manager, marketing communications person for OMEP. What do you do to build audience on your side?
Basically, all I have to do is use my existing tools. So I tap into our current email subscribers, and Laura at Tech Accelerator provides all of the registration links, the content, and the graphics. And so I embed that information in our monthly newsletters. As part of that, I also send standalone invitations for each showcase to a relevant audience. And then we share, of course, on social media platforms like Facebook and LinkedIn. And then also share the follow-up with our audience afterwards of the recorded webinar, so that those who missed it can have a chance to see what's in it.
Great. So Laura, on your side, what are you doing to get things packaged up to get that ready for Jasmine?
Thanks, Skip. So yeah, as Jasmine said, we try to really productize the entire program for the MEP centers, and so we have a series of banners that we put together that you can see here on the screen. We also have a program overview that we produce for each event, and that basically gives a synopsis of the event, includes an agenda, and dossiers on our panelists as well as the suppliers that have been selected to present. So it's a really nice way to give people a sense of what's coming. In addition to all of that, all of those deliverables, we typically have about 20,000 people per sector that we hit through direct mail, We hit social media, trade media, it's promoted on our website. So in addition to the promotions that Jasmine and the other MEP centers are doing, we do a considerable amount of promotion on the back end. Beyond that, we also make sure all these materials are available to all of our presenters or panelists, conveners, universities. So they're able to really leverage their networks as well and make sure that they're spreading the word, and that works really effectively as well. So all of this drives to our landing page, which you can see here on the screen. There you can see there's that program overview that I went through quickly, a synopsis of what we'll cover in the event, and then there's a registration link here where essentially we ask some qualification questions. And what this does, and we'll go into that in a little more detail here in a minute, but what this does is it really gives us a lot of intel before the event for our presenting suppliers, so that instead of just a canned promotional PowerPoint that they might normally do, they can really tailor their presentation. And Andy and Ron from our business development team will be talking about that a little bit more in a minute. So,
let me just jump in here and just make the observation that we hear an amazing amount of a volume of response that's very varied. So if we have a couple hundred people attending and we ask these 4 questions, it takes a smart person 8 hours to categorize the input. So it's a lot of input. We synthesize it, and we do get it to the presenters. And Andy and Ron will tell you about that in a minute. Something else that we do is we vary this based on event. So for the robotics event, for example, we wanted to know what things do you want to move or manipulate with a robot. And again, that's information that's really, really important to the presenter to know before they present to the audience. So here's an example of a blow-up of one of the responses from one attendee. So if you're in New Jersey, this might be of interest to you, but I just want you to have a moment to look at this level of input from the attendee that you have before the event. And I want you to know that we roll this stuff up and we get this information to OMEP in advance, so the right consultant can view it and say, I know that guy, maybe I should call him before the event. And again, we make sure that the presenters are ready to address those concerns. Laura, any other questions or any other observations about your preparation and acquisition process?
Well, I think actually if we could advance to the next slide, one thing that I think is really notable is that we have a lot of teams attending. And so there's actually, if you could go one more, Andy, there we go. So to David's prior point about gaining consensus, we have teams attending. And so you can see here we've got folks from all over the place. And a lot of times they're sharing this virally. We're not even marketing the event to all of these individuals. Sometimes they are we get a lot of pass along where they're sharing this virally. So, we talked about the mechanics, how we get there, but why don't you talk a little bit more about how we're motivating them? How is this happening? Why are people sharing this virally and encouraging colleagues to join?
Well, I'll do that. I just want to make the observation, just put voice to it. I mean, if you look at Treetop Foods there, you see that that's 10 people from 6 different plants attending. And as Laura mentioned, we only invited 2 of them. The rest of it's organic. They invite the rest of them themselves. And then we know that both these companies meet as a group after the event to discuss what they've seen and what they think about it. So that really is happening. But to Laura's question about attracting and motivating the audience, Andy, can you bump me down to small slides again? And I'll just walk through some of that. One of the things that we've learned over years of doing this sort of thing is that whether we're talking to a big company like BP has been one of our clients on an enterprise basis, down to a very small manufacturer, they'll say, well, yeah, innovation is great, and I'd like to learn how to do it, and that's wonderful. But if I'm going to put all my people in a room to watch something, it better be something that I can buy and install today. Don't waste my time. Give me something I can use. And we hear that sometimes with emphasis, again, from both very big companies and small and medium-sized companies. So in order, Laura's question is, how do we motivate people to attend? Well, let's go back to the beginning. There has to be a problem that they all want to solve, or most of them want to solve. So back to the beginning, we have to identify their biggest problems, and I'll talk a minute about how we do that. Once we have identified the problem and the use cases and the nirvana ideas of, gosh, I could solve my problem if only this thing existed, is there an emerging technology that might do that? That sort of information informs who we're going to go get to be a vendor. So here's the first characteristic of the vendor we're looking for. Yeah, okay, most of the audience doesn't know who you are. You're an emerging technology or you're a new innovation from an existing company. And you're going to solve the problem as defined by the customer. There may be different ways of solving it. You might be a component or you might be a complete solution, but you're going to solve the problem. And it's deployable right now. So when the show is over, somebody could phone you up and you could come do a plant visit and deploy the thing with field support. So it's that balance between it's new, but it's not so new that it bleeds. And then we want you to be unique. If we have 3 presenters, we want 3 unique things, but we also want them to play nice with current environments and not insist that the world completely adjust to their cool invention. And if we have 3 presenters, which we normally do, we don't want 3 carbon copies. We want 3 different elements or 3 components or 3 approaches that for sure are adjacent, not directly competitive, and maybe might even be synergistic where, gosh, if you had number 1, number 2 would run even better. So that's what we're looking for. And finally, and we have some of our audience that actually can articulate this. We learned this from our customers. They want the 3-way P&L win. They don't want just to save money. They don't want to just make the energy efficiency people happy. They want a strategic benefit measured 3 ways. I'm going to be able to make more things and sell more things and make more money. I'm going to be able to have less breakage or better quality, so maybe I can sell more things or sell them for more dollars. And then finally, it's not just energy out the window. I want to reduce a bunch of operating expenses, so it's a strategic win. And what we find is that if we give them that trifecta, then what's going to happen is it does runs cleaner, it runs with less energy, and so the public policy goal is met as well. So that's answering your question, Laura. That's how we get them. David, Laura, do you have any questions or thoughts about any of this before we move on to the next thing?
Yeah, this is David here, Skip. It seems like a lot of work to make all that happen. How do you go about doing that, and how much of an effort is it?
It's a lot of work, and the point of this little bumper here that says paradox, the minority of manufacturers can express themselves the way I just summed up the whole of them. But even the ones that can express it say, gosh, it's more than I can do. I'm too busy. It's a lot of work. So I'd like to bring Andy and Ron in. Andy and Ron are our researcher and event producers, and they can talk a little bit about the process that they go through. Ron, do you want to talk about how we find them and how you hook them?
Sure. Well, ET Accelerator scans a wide range of sources, and we've developed our own proprietary tools to conduct global searches for technology solutions. In order to arrive at 3 well-qualified presenters, we'll often investigate somewhere between 50 to 100 companies before we'll whittle that list down to a top 20 that will call for direct discussions and vetting. We often look for technologies from early-stage companies as well as well-established companies whose solutions are both best in class and complementary to each other, as Skip mentioned earlier. Sometimes we'll uncover an early-stage pre-product technology that's so exciting, so game-changing, that we'll have that company present to give our audience a glimpse of the future. Andy, would you like to talk a little bit more about our coaching and rehearsal process?
Absolutely. Thanks, Ron. One of the things that's pretty different about what we do is that when any company goes in to present to a prospective client or a trade organization, oftentimes they go in with a minimal of information behind them. So not only do we survey the audience in advance so that we understand what some of the critical needs and wants are, but we convey that information to the presenters. So we go through a rigorous rehearsal process, sharing that information with the presenters so that when they get on screen and they're delivering their content to you, they're well informed about what your needs and wants are. And that's proven to be a huge value and appreciated by both the presenters and the recipients in the audience.
Okay, David, Linda, any questions for Andy and Ron? Go ahead.
Yes, I do have a question. I have a quick question. So, is this kind of like a pull program? How much work is it? How does that work?
Well, it is a pull program. I mean, it's good to point that out because it isn't accidental. It's demand driven. We don't make it up. It's what the audience, it's what the industry as a whole wants to see, or the manufacturing segment as a whole wants to see. Andy, we have a success story from one of the MTAC events that maybe we can talk about and talk about how that did work. Go ahead and tell us about Trident Seafoods.
Trident Seafoods is a major seafood packer with operations across the Pacific Northwest. They're distributed across Alaska, Washington, and Oregon. They have huge energy consumption issues. They were looking for a technology that would allow them to really recover their waste heat energy. And when they came to our recent showcase on that topic, they met Energy Concepts. And Energy Concepts was talking about their absorption chillers, but lo and behold, not only did they have the ability to capture waste heat energy and convert it, but they can do it with a sub-zero output. So for Trident, this was huge. Not only could they get their waste heat used efficiently, but they could also go down to minus 40 Fahrenheit, which was critical for them. So this was a $1.3 million a year savings potentially in electricity. And literally the day after the showcase, they were in communication with each other. And by the end of the week, Energy Concepts had spec'd out 4 different projects for Trident Seafoods.
So 4 different projects for 4 different plants. Linda, David, any observations about how that works out from your side?
Yeah, Skip, this is Linda. I have a question. So with this example, it looks like a connection was made between the presenter, Energy Concepts, and Trident Seafood, but both of them are manufacturers. So in this situation, where would the MEPs fit in?
Well, I mean, what you're saying is that everybody's a manufacturer. So if there's, we know that Energy Concepts is from Maryland. So if we tied in and attributed that success to the Maryland MEP, that's a win for a MEP. And we know that Trident has plants in 3 states, and so there are at least 3 other MEPs that we can tie in. And one of the really cool things about this is, if you think about, the equation and the arithmetic, one solution provider might get 20 wins, and then that would attribute to 20 different MEPs, and we can make sure that all the MEPs in those states are aware of this activity, and certainly we'd want the MEPs to be helping bring the audience as well.
I think it's important to mention also that Energy Concepts is an early stage manufacturer and 3-time grant recipient from the SBIR program. So in effect, our process built a bridge and created a new pathway to commercialization for this early stage manufacturer.
Right, and I think what that means is at least once a year, folks in a MEP center have to report back to Gaithersburg what's been going on, and public policy wins are important. So what's happening is that the law of large numbers, large audiences, large numbers of innovators, we know that we're going to be positively impacting and helping commercialize on behalf of grant-making federal agencies, and we will attribute that activity out to individual MEPs. So the MEP centers win coming and going, public policy wins, the manufacturers win coming and going. It's a win all the way around. I think it's a good time for us to think about doing another success story. This one is Lumetric Lighting. I'm not going to introduce it, but Andy, just go ahead and roll that tape.
So with just simply by doing really a 20-minute presentation and some questioning, next thing we know, we're in the customer's facility and we're doing the audit. Normally that is a multi-customer meetings before we even get to that point. So it was really a very odd feeling to be walking in the door. We're already to this point that we're normally, it was just, I just can't stress how odd a feeling that was. You know, it's like, well, I'm sitting here looking at ET Accelerator. It was a very accelerated process.
How accelerated was it? Within 30 days of the Innovation Showcase, CTO Greg Davis and his CEO, John Schwally, were on the ground for 5 site visits to major manufacturing plants in 2 days, traveling north through California and Oregon. We caught up with Greg and John just before they flew home to Tennessee. They expect 4 deployments from these 5 visits. We asked John how he made sense of a 30-minute web presentation that could yield this kind of result. How much work was it?
There wasn't a lot of preparation time that we had to put into it. You know, you delivered us the materials, we reviewed the materials, we tailored the presentation to the industry or the points that we wanted to bring out. And, you know, bang for the buck, you know, I spend an hour and I've got 5 to 10 good solid sale leads afterwards. I'll take that all day long. You know, bring me more industries.
The event is engineered to encourage whole team attendance. It's only 2 hours. There's no travel. Attention from the entire team is another reason why Innovation Showcase presenters say their first site visit feels like it's visit number 4. Finally, there's a buzz in the air because often, prior to the ET Accelerator discovery process, neither buyer nor seller had any idea the other existed.
They probably never would have discovered us. Never would.
Okay, David, Linda, Ron, Andy, any follow-up thoughts on this success story?
This is Dave here. Skip, you know, this just cements that point that we've made a couple of times, that you have the opportunity to get this tremendous leverage, and it's not just the presenting company's territory where there are going to be benefits for technology acceleration, but it extends, in this case, you know, through 2 states and, you know, 4 to 5 additional metrics that come across. I mean, it's a great way to leverage, you know, a half an hour's worth of time to bring the whole network together in a way that I haven't seen in many other of these types of organizations.
Linda, anything on your side?
Nope, it's great success story.
Okay, well, great. Let's go ahead and move on to another point that we want to make. We've talked about a bunch of our processes, but we haven't really talked about how do we really dig down and figure out what the mega problems are sector by sector. And so for all you consultants, and if you've ever been a consultant, you'll enjoy some of this because it's not just one person in the room, it's the entire sector. And we begin by saying, okay, what problem do you all have that you all know each other has that maybe an emerging technology can help with? And we get a lot of reticence, and then we have to ask again and ask the 20 questions. And finally, we get to, so for example, in the case of food processors over the last 2 years, waste heat recovery, the biggest problem. And then so we say, well, okay, what kind of waste heat recovery? And we discover that there are 9 sources of waste heat in a plant, or 9 forms, and maybe 12 places or forms where you can recover and put that heat. So which one do you want? Because we can't fit 80 modalities or 80 methods into one 2-hour showcase. So we ask 20 more questions 5 more times, and we finally figure out that what they want to do on the whole, the most important thing is expended steam, no longer boiling water, kind of hot oil, low-grade heat. Can I turn that into chilling, or can I turn it into very, very cold? That's how we get down to the topic.
So what sort of, we've talked a lot about what the vendor has to say in these. What are the receivers of the technology or the solutions? How's it working for them?
Well, it's working pretty darn good, and I think that we have a full-size slide so you can read the fine print, but this is actual feedback from real attendees, and the summary is, yeah, there's no way we could have done this on our own, thanks very much, and it is very entertaining, thank you for that, and we never would have, neither the buyer nor the seller would have found each other. So that's one piece of feedback, and then the other one that we that we really like. We really like this quote because Northwest Food Processors is a very well-run organization, and they're also pretty picky. So this is a big statement from them, and we like it.
So, Skip, a lot of these successes seem to happen really fast. That's not my typical experience. How do you explain that?
Well, they happen fast because of the law of large numbers. We've got hundreds of people in the audience, and if you have a sample that large, there will be somebody across the entire x-axis, right? So there's always somebody who's ready to go, who's ready to solve the problem. The bulk of the audience falls further back. You know, there are laggards in the world, but our experience is that folks that wait, maybe they're not being laggard, maybe they're just waiting for it to pencil out, maybe they're waiting for the right feature, or maybe they've got their capital already committed for the next 24 months and they've got to wait to free things up. So what we want to do, we talked earlier about the Comet Trail after the event. What we want to do is track those variables so that when the new feature that makes it accessible shows up, we want our attendee to know that. We want them to hear it from us so they can act on a brisk basis when the time is right. So we send out regular newsletters monthly, and so I'm going to open this one up. We only have 3 links per article or per newsletter. Here's the first one, market for absorption chillers. Click again. There's the key paragraph. Now I've stylized this, but the point I want to make is we're tracking. And when modular microchannel chillers have become perfected, then we're going to let everybody know. And if that's what was holding things up, bang, they can proceed. If they then say, wow, 2 years have gone by, I can't remember. So fine, go to our website and watch the event. And then if they're going to call you up because they're your client and say, hey, Dave, hey, Mary, help me out here, we've got it fixed so that you can be one step ahead of them. You can go to your secret spot on our website and pull up the consultant's resource pack and either read the 30-second abstract and get ready for that call in 5 minutes, or dig as deep as you want, because all this stuff we've been talking about is captured and archived and available for 36 months after the event. And it all starts with the idea that we stay in touch with this newsletter. So now what I want to do, I'd like to bring in our librarian, Cindy Romaine. And so Cindy, can you tell us a little bit about how we do this 36-month trail? By the way, let's introduce you first. You were the librarian at Nike for 17 years. Right, and then you've been for 1 year, you were the past president of the Special Librarians Association. Tell us what that association is.
So it's an association of, just like this, organizations that have specialized information needs, especially industry or government, military.
Okay, so here's the exercise. We have low tolerance in the readers. We want to just give them 3 spectacular, highly relevant, I've got to read this month, things to look at. How do you do that?
So we start with a tool that we use, we call a listening platform, and it scans thousands and thousands of sources, and it's about 75,000. And then it whittles it down to about 25. And from that, we take it down even lower and pick the most relevant that we think are current for the newsletter that we need to add to the newsletter. And that way, when we send the newsletter out, it's just the most current, relevant, juicy bits.
Okay. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I just want to say this. I use the term listening platform, and it's kind of a specialized vocabulary for us. We call it a listening platform because it enables us to listen to industrial development, so we can find new technologies. And that's, for information gathering before we do the innovation showcase. But we also use it to listen after the showcase. You mentioned this 36-month Comet Trail. So we can really use it on preceding and following and be able to keep up with the developments that inevitably occur.
Great. So I want you to explain how one of these listening platforms works. And Andy has bumped the slides up for us. So talk about what this does.
Well, there is a black box, actually. And then, Andy, if you turn that slide on, go back one more there. So we can see how it works here, where we have lots and lots of kinds of information, industry and trade publications, traditional media, non-traditional media. It even tracks some of the tweets and social media, as well as company-produced content and subscription content services. And by that, I mean if you are subscribing to Wall Street Journal, we can ask it to include that information. And from that, it makes data analytics, it absorbs your personal profile, and it even has a learning algorithm responding to what you use most. And from that, you get personalized intelligence. This is one of the things I think is really very powerful with the listening platform. You may be getting information from many different sources. You can aggregate all that into this one tool so that you can find out what's going on and say dissolve solids just from one source rather than going to many different newsletters. You can consolidate all that, and that really helps you save time and be more focused.
Okay, so we're back to small slides, and we do want to make a very quick point that this tool that we're using is a cloud computing tool, and it's very inexpensive compared to, well, tell us just quickly, how much would an enterprise, a large enterprise, have paid for the kind of exercise that you're able to do for us just a couple years ago?
Right. So actually, I think it's an interesting story, Skip, because it started with the pharmaceutical industry, where they were literally having hundreds of, many librarians and many researchers scurrying around, finding information and pulling together newsletters on the topics that they needed for their manufacturing. And since then, we've gotten much better in the 90s with personalized search. And now we have too much information, so it's a matter of finding the right information and really focusing it. And this tool allows us to do that.
Right, and so what we're really excited about is that it's so inexpensive. I mean, for us it's inexpensive, but it's also, by extension, inexpensive for small and medium manufacturers. They could have their own subscription to this kind of tool, and that's something we can also talk about being helpful with as well. I'd just like to just close by making, again, the observation that this is not an event. This is a system that ties in with what you're currently doing and amplifies it and doesn't interfere with anything. And to make that point and maybe some other observations, let's bring Chris in again. Chris, is your camera working, or are we stuck with your image
No,
here?
you see the carefully airbrushed picture, and that'll have to do for today. Everybody knows what I look like. I'm here to make 3 points. One is this thing's an easy product to introduce to your market. I mean, a minimum level of market interest is achievable by sending out email invitations. And honestly, that's kind of what we've done in the last several months in doing these things, and it's resulted in a pretty good response. I think we can do more to build an audience, way more, but in an atmosphere where resources are limited, you can just sort of push the button. The second point, no need for extensive staff training or skill sets that are widely outside of our typical MEP consultant profile. Pretty easy lift to understand what's going on here. Follow-up consulting related to the deployment of this stuff is usually within the skill set of our existing staff and consulting group or affiliate group for most centers. So that's a good thing. And then finally, because it's online, it's easy for us to share the cost of the program. The cost is a function of how many workshops we want to do and how many centers are participating. So really, this is a crowdfunding effort on my part. We like this product. We want to keep doing it, but we need help with funding. The design we're contemplating right now is that centers would join us on a subscription basis. OMEP would serve as the prime contractor and program coordinator. We're not seeking to make a profit. We're just simply want to reasonably recover our costs, and our core interest is that attracting others to participating so that we can afford to move the service forward. So to gauge your interest, we'll be shooting out a Survey Monkey for your response fairly shortly after this call. and I'd like you to please give us your due consideration and honest appraisal. And I think that's all I've got to say, Skip. If we can move to questions, I think that'd be.
So Susan has this question: can upcoming events be shared with other MEPs? Absolutely. We will get a schedule of events out to you. And how many events depends upon how many MEPs join in. Donald's question: have there been any measure of dollars of impact of an event? Well, I just would just refer back to the Trident Seafood event or success story. That was multi-million dollars of impact per plant, and they're looking at 4 plants. So yeah, this does have an impact. We know that you had to get off to the 11 o'clock, and so if you have to go ahead. And Al says, focus appears to be manufacturing efficiency. What about new and emerging product technologies? Okay, so here's the deal. We know that in order to get an audience, we have to show them ready-made, ready to go, plug and play. Well, at least I can buy it and turn it on solutions. But once we've got that audience, we then have permission to show them other stuff that is around the corner. Hard to attract an audience to see around the corner, but if you got the audience, yes, then we can go to early stage, bleeding stage technologies and make that stuff visible. Next question: how does ET Accelerator recover their costs? Is there a fee? We've got several. Yeah, go ahead.
So, Chris, this is Chris. Bob, at this point, yeah, ET Accelerator needs to get paid to do this work. They recover their costs currently by us paying them an amount that we get from our grant funds. To continue this work and make it available to the system, OMEP is proposing that we engage a network of centers, charge a subscription fee, and then that fee is then used to stand up the number of events that is afforded by the number of participating centers that we have. So what I'm hoping is that we get enough interest as a result of this webinar to start into a more specific discussion about how much, how long, how many, et cetera. My working number right now is somewhere around $25,000 for a year's worth of events, and then how many events in that year is determined by how many participants we have. But I don't want to make arbitrary decisions on how we proceed. I want there to be a group of center directors or other staff, leadership staff, to work with so that we can figure this out along with ET Accelerator and do a thing that's both affordable and provides robust content. Okay, long answer.
Right. So, the next step is to hear back from the centers and see what the level of interest is. And as Chris said, we would want to form a steering committee, so the steering committee can help inform, what sectors should be prioritized, what mega problems do the consultants believe need to be chased, and then also do nominations. Help us with nominations for manufacturers who should be on pilot teams. So we're looking forward to hearing from you.
All callers are unmuted.
And we have unmuted the line, so if there's somebody on the phone that wants to ask a question by telephone, please go ahead and speak.
This is Mike Wilson, Mass MEP. Do you have topics of upcoming events to assure interest in our client base?
We are standing by to hear what you folks would like to do. Our next event is July 29th, and it's on filtration and reuse of water. But we're sort of plastic on the two beyond that. But what we'd really like to do is to get some input so that we know which sectors are of universal importance to all 60 centers so that we can focus our efforts there. So we want to go through a quick process. Go ahead.
obviously the willingness to subscribe has a lot to do with the character of the subjects. And it's chicken and an egg thing, I realize.
Well, it is chicken and egg, but I mean, I would just call it iterative, right? So we go through a process of hearing what the centers want to focus on, and then we'll go explore that and come back to the steering committee and say, okay, well, here are some good ideas for which there are no emerging technologies that we can find right now, and here is where the really cool stuff is coming that can solve that problem. So really, in real life, what's going to happen is we'll have 10 targets, and 6 or 7 of them will be good, and 3 of them will be clunkers because we can't respond. And that's iterative. We'll discover that ourselves.
Got it.
Good question, though. Okay, Chris, do you have any other questions that you know that you heard when you were inviting folks to attend that maybe we should address?
You know, that the only other issue that we didn't talk about was, you know, how this might fit into a broader tech acceleration, I guess I would call that, bundle of services. And the point that I made a few times with in my individual conversations was that this is a niche play, right? I think actually you can compare it to RTI, whereas RTI is a tech scouting drill down for a specific company. This is more like tech scouting on a mass basis, and you're probably going to need both kinds of products if you're going to have a full system. So we're not trying to displace anybody's approach.
Yeah, I would just echo that. We want to listen carefully. We want to adapt and tweak the program so that it does fit like a dovetail fit, meet your needs, and be additive so that it feeds activity into your existing programs or is another resource for your existing programs. Well, okay, thanks so very, very much for attending. Just so you know, there were something close to 50 folks that joined. So, team, Linda, David, Jasmine, Laura, Andy, Ron, any final thoughts from you folks?
No final thoughts, just thanks for attending, everybody. I really appreciate your attention.
Yes, this is Chris. Echo that.
Okay, thanks so much, and we'll be talking to you all soon.